Hi everyone, we're Julie and Acquilus from CBM-Global, and in this presentation we're going to take you through different ways that you can consult with potential beneficiaries and stakeholders as you start to scope out a project design. In the previous presentation, we talked about all the things that you need to prepare for overall as you start to develop a project design.
Thank you, Julie. Consultation is important in that it helps you get wide input into your project. It makes sure that you are responding to the real needs. And remember, your consultation process has to make efforts to be accessible and inclusive, so everyone can give input.
So consultation is something, according to your timing and your budget, that is going to be something that you need to think about. And there is, of course, different ways of doing it, as we've listed here. To give you an example, you could do a big workshop with lots of different people in it, representing different sectors, to try and unpack and find out what are the issues, what are the opportunities, as you help to think about what you're working on or what you want to work on. Or you could do, for example, a series of focus groups going around to different constituencies within the area that you're planning to work. Or you could have face-to-face meetings with government to explore, for example, opportunities, or you can have meetings with OPD leaders. You could split it up and make sure that you have meetings with women who are part of an OPD and then leaders of an OPD to get different perspectives. You could have discussions with other civil society organisations or NGOs that are working in a similar area to understand what they're doing and what are some of the opportunities or some of the challenges that they find.
At the same time, also talk to the member teams and also CBM technical teams about models that test good practices that they are trying to promote. Member teams have perspectives because often their funding is across many different countries. So you can bring some of those perspectives from other CBM funded projects. The other thing that is important to think about as you do consultations is about inclusion and equity. How do you make sure you get the view of those people who are hidden or hesitant to talk? You don't want to just talk to the loudest people or the most important or the most connected people. So it's useful to think quite deliberately around how those hidden voices are going to be heard. Are we really listening? Are we going to do any harm by our consultations?
Yeah, it's really important. I remember a situation where we were asking women and men about, for example, the burden of women's labour. This was as part of a community consultation. And we didn't really think about what was going to happen afterwards. So what we realised afterwards is that the men all became very angry at what the women had said in this group, what we'd prompted the women to say about how hard they worked. And, you know, we took that information and off we went. But it obviously had negative ramifications for the women later. So these are the things that you need to think about as you plan and prepare, and think about what order are we going to do things and why. And it's also useful to think about how your consultation process is being documented. For example, who's doing that? Are they just writing up the stuff that was written, or are they actually talking to other people in the room who maybe can't write or aren't literate? Is your documentation people making sure that they're hearing everything and not just writing down the stuff, you know, that the big boys in the room talk about?
So what we are gonna do now is just to run through about 6 examples of consultation approaches. So tools that you could use in a consultation. I'm not going to go into great details. And if you are interested in any of these, go to Google and you'll be able to find examples of how you specifically do them. So the first one, we call it rich picture visioning. So this is where you get people into groups, usually about 4 or 5 for about 20 minutes. You give them a big sheet of paper, lots of colors, marker pens, stickers, labels, things like that, and ask them, okay, think about key people, organizations, processes in this community and draw it. You can use symbols, arrows, colors to show the interactions, the power, the conflict, the opportunities. When I've done this, people will often sit there for a while going,
Yeah,
oh,
and they think, oh no, oh,
oh
what are we
no.
going to draw? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what to do, and everyone will stare blankly.
Yeah.
Don't jump in as a facilitator, just leave it, and
Yeah.
eventually someone will pick up the pen and get it going. You'll expect it to be messy. You don't expect a beautiful drawing, of course, but the value of this is then after 20 minutes, every group gets up and present their picture. And then you can discuss the different pictures, the similarities, the differences, the themes. Groups can identify common themes that they can talk about, and that can help you get a bit of a snapshot about what's in the community.
Right. So here's an example. So if you looked at it, you wouldn't know what it meant. So you do need people to actually explain what it means. It looks a bit messy. It's not particularly beautiful, but it will help people to explain what their drawing is about. And then you start to draw out some of the themes about what's happening in a particular community. The next one is called participatory systems mapping. Well, that sounds very important and big. So it's a bit like the rich picture one, but here you're asking people to think about a specific issue to look at, whereas with the other one you were saying kind of, just draw what's out there. So here you could do this a few different times, and you could look at different issues. So, for example, you could choose an issue like what's stopping people with disability from getting employment in this area, or then you could do another one which is like what's stopping children with disabilities from going to school, or even what's stopping women with disabilities from getting employment. So, and then you get people to look at the issues, the links between the issues, the barriers, the different organizations to show the linkages and relationships. So a bit like the previous one that Acquilus described, you do it in small groups. You usually give people about 20 minutes, and then you get people to present and analyze their different maps. So this helps people to think about what are some of the linkages between things that you could perhaps try and then influence in a future project that you're planning. What are some of, for example, the barriers or the bottlenecks that are stopping a particular issue from getting addressed, like employment? Is there any areas where you could do particular harm by addressing something in the wrong way? So this is really useful for helping with planning.
So there might be things like this where you are showing the connections and the relationships between a woman with mental health condition in a community, or it could be a particular group in a community.
Yeah.
The next one is a problem quiz. Sure, this is something that you're familiar with. So this is where you look at the problem. You'll write down what a problem is. You look at some of the root causes. So what is hidden underneath? For example, children with disability access to school. Why aren't children with disability going to school? And what are some of the root causes? So the root causes might be, for example, parental fear that they're gonna be bullied. It's access to transport. It is, what else? What else is it? It's a
teachers,
teacher's capacity to teach kids, for example. And then you look at the effects. So fairly easy way of mapping a problem and what is perceived as the root cause and the effect. This is useful to have different groups to reflect on the root causes to a problem or the effects, because you might find that different groups see things very differently. It helps you think beyond what you could assume to be the case.
Yeah, and if you do it, and it's interesting, if you break up people by different impairment groups or by men and women, you might have really different perspectives about what the root causes are going to be.
Yep.
Okay, next one. So in this one, strength-based questions, you can try and have a focus group that starts with these sort of strengths-based questions. So, for example, you're talking to a group of people with disabilities. So you're asking questions like, what are the strengths or what are the good things in this community for people with disability? When was a time that people with disability felt most accepted or most energized in this community, and why was that? When were you at your best? What do you like best about this community or about this group? What's the potential? What are the main things about this community that make it strong? What can we build on?
Yeah, Julie, these are very positive questions as opposed to the kind of more negative or problem deficit questions. So what are the problems? What needs to be fixed? What are the barriers? Yeah. So again, you might find that by asking questions in this way, you draw out some of the potentials, or you draw out examples of people who are really strong agents of change, and you can then identify and get involved in your project.
Yeah, so you can find those real movers and shakers within a community who can take things forward in a positive way. So the next one, force field analysis, is where you start thinking, okay, where are we now on a specific issue and where do we want to get to? For example, the state we're in at the bottom, for example, we've got no regular income. And where we want to get to is we want people to have a regular income to be economically secure. So then you think about what are the forces that can push that change to happen and what are the forces that are stopping that change from happening. So in the green pen, you've got those positive forces that might push the change. And then in the red, it's like the negative forces that might stop it. And so then you think about, okay, well, what could be influenced to either push that change along or to stop that change from happening? So here's an example. So at the bottom, the situation is that you've got no pensions are available for people with psychosocial disability. That's the situation now. Where you want to get to is for the pensions to be available. So in a consultation process, you're asking people, okay, so what are some of the things that are stopping people or stopping this change from happening? So one thing could be people actually don't think that psychosocial disability is a disability, so there shouldn't be a pension. The government doesn't really have a systematic way of addressing who who might have a psychosocial disability or not, and assessing that. There might be a view amongst government that people are going to exploit the system and, you know, pretend to have a disability when they really don't. And there might not be enough political support for something like this. So these are some of the things that stop the change from happening. And then on the other side, there might be what are the things that could push change along. So this is like, you've got a few strong local individuals who are really good advocates, and the OPD is really good at talking to government. And then you've got some good local research about the benefits of pensions. And then you've actually got the police who feel like this would be a good idea because they feel that it might stop some of the issues in the community around people with psychosocial disability. So you look at these forces one way or another, and you help to feed that into your plan.
Yeah, so the next one is stakeholder mapping and power analysis. It's a little bit like the other participatory mapping. So what organization can help achieve the plan? So these are maybe some of the questions that you could ask. So use this when you've got more of a plan in place. Which organizations are interested, which organizations are more influential, and how can they be more effectively involved in the project? How are different? How are different people connected? So these are some of the questions that you could ask. So here you've got an example where we've looked at, okay, who's got high influence? Well, we can see that the mayor has got high influence, but is not interested. And then on the other side, the Women's Affairs Office has a high influence and is highly interested. So let's make sure that they are all involved in our project. So this can help you plan out what you're going to focus on and who you need to shift.
Yeah, so it's a useful one as well. The last one is an interesting one. And if you Google this, Margolis wheel, it was invented by a guy called Mr. Margolis. And you'll find the detailed instructions online. So this is a good one if you're doing a big consultation and there's a few people in the room who are really dominating the discussion and you feel that not everybody is being heard, either to talk about what some of the problems are. So what you do, so for example, if you've got say a group of 10 people, you get people into groups of 10 and you have an outer ring of chairs and an inner ring of chairs, and each person is paired off. And you move around. So each person spends 3 minutes as a problem presenter. So they're the ones that are on the, in the outside, and they talk about what they see as the problem. And they talk to the other person who is the solution suggester. So that person spends 3 minutes and you're dialoguing about the problem and the solution. And then you move around to the next person and you talk to them. What do you think's a problem? What do you think's a solution? And then you swap sides. So then you become the you become the solution suggester, and somebody else brings out the problems. So this is quite interesting because it helps different people to present their ideas in a way that's not where they're forced to sort of stand up and talk in a big group, which is often quite scary for people. And it's useful because pretty quickly it helps to get consensus about what are the particular problems and what might be some of the common solutions that everybody's thinking about. So you need to then bring it back into a bigger group to have that plenary where you actually document, well, what are some of the problems that we kept on hearing as we went around, and what was some of the, not only the common solutions, but also some of the amazingly, out of left field solutions. So you got a lot of ideas that could bubble up. So what's good about this one is that the problems and the solutions don't just come from sort of the noisiest or the most talkative people in the room.
Right. So just to sum up, these are some of the first activities that you need to do as part of the design process. You need to give yourself enough time. You need to have conversations with your potential partners, and you need to throw out a wide net to gather input from the community. So input from the community, for example, the government, and any other organization with which you are going to work with or try to influence.
So this is just a little snapshot of some ideas of workshop ideas that you could do. In the next video, we're going to talk about how you take this information from a consultation process and then move it into a tighter, more coherent and actionable plan. So look forward to that. Bye for now.
Bye.